Chapter 566. Jean carefully moved around the room, feeling the hard texture of the walls. At the moment he was searching for anything that could help him escape. He had no trouble seeing through the darkness, thanks to his extensive training in the darkness, and it was because of this that he also had no trouble moving around the small room. In fact, he was almost like a fish inside of a pond. As he raised his head, he noticed a small hole above him. He was instantly able to tell what it was as he looked down at his clothes, which were covered in filth. Should I perhaps wait until when they open up again and take a chance from there? Jean thought to himself as he carefully observed the tube. That won't work. He soon shook his head. The hole was a bit too small for him to fit in, and even if he managed to somehow deal damage to the person above, it would only serve to anger them, which in this situation would prove fatal. Just what am I supposed to do? Moving toward a certain section of the room, Jean placed his finger on a certain area of the wall where he felt a slightly wet sensation. Without further ado, he brought it to his mouth and drank. I'm glad all of my training is paying off, Jean thought as he tasted the water in his mouth. From a glance, he could tell that it was water and not poison, as it did not release any strange smell that he was familiar with. Of course, that wasn't the only reason why Jean could tell it wasn't poisonous, because there were several other clues that indicated to him that the liquid was drinkable. One such example was the fact that it left no trace on the wall behind it, as typically with strong poisons, it would leave corrosive lines on the hard rock. Further adding on to that, the moss around it did not decay but seemed to rather thrive on it. That alone was already an indication that it was unlikely that the liquid was poisonous. Regardless, Jean didn't really care, as his body was immune to poisons. With the amounts of poisons he had tasted in his lifelines, he wasn't afraid of any of them. Given his profession, this was a must. What sort of assassin could not withstand poison? This place. It was like the back of his house. Bang. It was at that moment that Jean suddenly heard a muffled banging sound coming from the other side of the room he was in. He immediately became startled. What was that? Bringing his ear close to the wall, he tried to see if he could hear the sound again. Bang. Once again Jean was able to hear the same muffled banging sound. It felt as though someone was punching the wall with full force. Are there other people here? Was he perhaps not the only one that was trapped in this place, but there were in fact others too? The thought suddenly reanimated his mind as he carefully placed both hands on the wall to better hear the sound. Bang. 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 Over the next few minutes, Kevin would continuously hear the same banging sound coming from the wall. Keeping track of the intervals between each punch, Jean slowly took a step back. 8 seconds delay for every sound. Sometimes a little bit less and sometimes a little bit more, but that was more or less the time interval between each punch. Counting down from 8, Jean's brows furrowed. It stopped. The latest understudies are on website. Waiting another couple of seconds to see if the sound was going to appear again, he soon realized that whoever was the one responsible for making the sound had stopped. This might be a gamble, but it's worth a shot. Jean was quick to come up with a decision. Clenching his hand into a fist, he pushed the wall as hard as he could. Bang. Auk. Screaming out in pain, my knees buckled and I kneeled on both knees to the ground. Fuck. It hurts like hell. Drip. Drip. With blood dripping down on the ground, I heavily panted for breath as I closed my eyes and repeated the same breathing technique from before. This was an essential thing that I needed to do. It wouldn't matter how hard I pounded the wall if my breathing was incorrect, as incorrect breathing would give me no benefits and would make everything that I had done senseless. Gulp. Swallowing another mouthful of saliva, my head turned toward the direction of where the water dripping sound came from. While licking the top and bottom of my lips, I forced myself to stop thinking about the water. The more I thought about it, the thirstier I felt. Fuck. I once again cursed as I felt my mind go numb. Just as I was about to despair over my circumstances, my ears pricked up a muffled banging sound coming from the right side. Bang. My head snapped in the direction of where the sound came from as I slowly stood up and walked toward the side of the wall. Pressing my ear on the side of the wall, I tried to hear the sound again. Bang. And I wasn't left disappointed. Exactly a couple of seconds after I pressed my ear against the side of the wall, I heard the same muffled sound coming from the distance. My eyes lit up when I heard this. Is there someone close by? The joy did not last for long, however, as I quickly grew a little apprehensive. What if the one that is making the noises is one of the people responsible for trapping me here and was just toying with me? This was a very real possibility that I couldn't exclude as my excitement died down a lot. Bang. Even then, moving back from my spot, I tensed my back and once again punched the wall. Bang. However improbable it was, this was my only hope at the moment. While I still had energy, I repeated the same breathing technique. Hoo. Bang. Smashing his fist against the wall, Jean merely frowned at the pain. With how sturdy his body was, he only received minor pain when punching the wall. 1, 2, 3. Counting down to 8, Jean prepared to punch the wall once more. However, just as he was about to punch, he suddenly heard another muffled banging sound coming from the other side of the room. Bang. A thin smile spread across his face as he heard the sound. It looks like he heard me. Thinking of something, Jean didn't immediately punch the wall like the last time he did. With a rather complex look on his face, he took a small stance and murmured to himself. Hopefully whoever it is that's on the other side, they know Morse code. Then without wasting a single second, he punched the wall in short and long time intervals. Ba, bong, bang, bang. Ba, bong, bang, bang. Right as my fist was about to hit the wall once again, my hand suddenly froze as my eyes opened wide. This pattern. Bend, bang. Ba. Bag. I soon covered my mouth with my hand as the chip inside of my head started to run at full throttle. It wasn't long before I realized something. It's Morse code. This type of long and short standardized sequence pattern. It closely resembled Morse code. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I was currently on another planet. What were the chances of a demon knowing Morse code? Unless, halting my thoughts there, I proceeded to listen to the wall. Ba, bang. Ba. Bag. Dark room. With the aid of the chip, I was able to instantly make out the message and my head snapped upwards. Human. This confirmed it. Whoever was communicating with me at the moment was a human, and they were in a similar situation to mine. I had no doubt about this as I crossed my arms together and fell into thought. It's most likely Jean. I mumbled to myself after a while. This was the conclusion I came up with after contemplating it for a while. My train of thought wasn't complicated. Rather, it was simple. We were currently on a planet where no humans should exist. Confirming that the other person was human and that during the time the portal expanded, Jean was resting on top of my shoulders. This was the only logical conclusion I could think of. There is no doubt that the person on the other side of the wall is Jean. I once again reaffirmed to myself. It could also be Kevin, but at the time he seemed to have entered the portal without any problems, making the validity of this theory rather low. The moment I realized that Jean was possibly the person behind the other room, the chip inside of my head started to run at full throttle once more. I was currently trying to formulate a message. Within seconds I was already done as my hand clenched into a fist. Here goes nothing. Ba. Bong. Bong. Bang. Jean. I stepped away from the wall after getting my message across. While I waited for an answer, my heart raced uncontrollably, and the pain in my knuckles became negligible. If Jean was truly the person behind the wall, then there was perhaps some hope in this situation. Bend, bang. 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 Ba. Who are you? My eyes lit up. It's really him. Unable to contain my excitement, I moved toward the wall and punched it again. Bang. Buff, bang. Bong. It's me, Ren. Ban. Buff, bang. Ba. Is this a prank? A prank. It took a moment for my mind to register what he was trying to say, and I quickly started sweating bullets. Shit. Bang. Buff, bang. Bong. Not a prank. Something went wrong. Believe me. Bang. Ba. Okay. Thank go. Ugh. It was at that moment that my vision suddenly grew blurry and I stumbled a couple of steps. Pressing my hand against the wall, I felt a nauseating feeling wash over me as my knees buckled. Shit, I've lost too much blood. It didn't take me a moment to understand what was happening to me as I felt the blood slip down from my knuckles. Sliding down and leaning my back against the wall, I smacked my lips together. This is bad. Drip. Drip. The dripping sound of the water in the distance never sounded as enticing as it did now. Struggling to use my head, I weakly raised my hand up. Using the last bit of energy inside of my body, I banged my fist against the side of the wall. Bang. Buff, bang. Bong. Bang. Buff, bang. Bong. Dark room. Water. Drinkable. This was all I could write in my current state. But it should do. Considering he had said he was also in a dark room, perhaps he knew whether the liquid flowing down the wall was drinkable. If he had one. But I could only risk it. Bang. Bah. Yes. It wasn't long before Jin's answer arrived and my eyes rekindled with hope. Thank God. Then, as though my energy had returned to me, I clenched the wall and propped my body up before stumbling across the room. Water. I weakly mumbled to myself as I arrived at the wall. Pressing my hand against that side of the wall, I stuck my tongue out. Ah. Chapter 567. As I leaned back against the wall, I rested my hand on my raised knee. Things are a lot more complicated than I originally thought. After conversing with Jean for the past couple of minutes, I realized that the situation was not as hopeless as I thought it was. Firstly, the mush that was thrown at me a few hours ago was actually food, and Jean also got it at the same time as I did. The reason why I knew it was food was because Jean said that it was edible. Likewise, the moss on the wall was apparently also edible. It made me realize something. Whoever trapped us here does not want to kill us. In fact, it seems as though they have plans for us. Had they actually not cared about us, they would have already killed us by now. For them to provide us with water and food, they defiantly had a use for us, and Jean also seemed to have understood this. The real question was, what use did we have for them? Is this some kind of experiment where we are the experiments, or are we more than just lab rats? Despite not knowing at the moment, I knew that I needed to put this on my priority list. My future courses of action depended on this. My brows furrowed suddenly in the middle of my thoughts. Now that I think about it, is it possible that other people got dragged into this planet as well? There was no explanation for Jean and I's sudden appearance. My last memory before appearing here was seeing the portal expand in front of me. After that, my vision grew black and my consciousness slipped. By the time I woke up, I found myself in this unfamiliar environment. Jezebeth. A name suddenly slipped out of my mouth. He was the person whom I thought was responsible for all of this. This wasn't just a hunch, but my belief that he was responsible for hurling Jean and me into the portal was solid. The real question was, are there any others that got swept into the portal as a result of his actions? So then this was more serious than I thought. Logically speaking, almost everyone in the mercenary group was strong. The key word was almost. In contrast to the others, Ryan and Small Snake did not have any combat skills, and both were extremely weak as well. Around and rank respectively. I could only fear for their lives if they suddenly became entangled in this world. There was a reason why the mission was judged to be rank. Shit. This realization prompted me to get up from the ground. Taking a few deep breaths, I tried to calm myself down. There's no use thinking about this right now. All I can do at the moment is continue training. It would be useless to think about the others at the moment since I was trapped here. It would only serve to distract my mind. Taking a stance, I massaged my knuckles while feeling the crust that formed over them. Although I'm not entirely sure if this is true, I believe that once I reach a certain stage I can break through the walls and reach Jean, hopefully. Bang. The latest understudies are on underfiv.website. After that, I punched the wall with all my might. What in the world am I? A confused look appeared on Liam's face as he scanned his surroundings. In his hazy memory, he couldn't quite recall what had happened moments prior to showing up here, but the last thing he remembered was being in the same room as Ren as he helped him remember his memories. So how did I get here? Liam furrowed his brows as he reached out to touch the leaf of the tree next to him. What a weird plant. Did Earth ever have plants like this? In addition to its rhombic shape, the leaves on the plant were in a zigzag pattern, which Liam found particularly bizarre. Scratching the back of his head, he reached out for one of the leaves and carefully touched them. Weird. He muttered as he finally let go of the leaf. Thousands of tiny glass-like needles were trying to puncture his skin as he felt the rough texture of the leaf. The toughness of Liam's skin prevented them from penetrating it, but it still nevertheless seemed strange. Was there ever a plant like this on Earth? Am I in the demon world? But how was that possible? He clearly remembered leading Ren out of the demon world. It was one of the memories that he had helped him recover during the session. He quickly shook his head. Since it's impossible that I'm in the demon realm, I must still be on Earth and probably got lost on my way back from that ugly-looking warehouse. The environment was indeed weird for the Earth, but since Liam realized just how bad his memory was, he knew that the reason why he felt this way was probably because he couldn't recall any of the plants and vegetation in front of him. Oh well. With a shrug of his shoulders, he took out his phone. He was shocked to discover, however, that there was no signal on his phone. Just great. He mumbled to himself as he put his phone away. Tao, what do I do? Taking a look to his left and right, Liam felt helpless in the current situation. Without his phone he was fucked. If only my Halfway through his sentence he saw a sudden movement toward his right side from the corner of his eye. Russell. A brown furry creature jumped from one of the bushes and headed toward Liam immediately after a rustling sound echoed out. Throughout the entire time, Liam showed no reaction as he carefully observed the incoming creature. With a simple movement of his hand, he reached out with his hand and grasped whatever was heading in his direction. Kayak. Kayak. A sound resembling a monkey's squeaking was heard from the distance. What's this? A curious look crossed Liam's face as he brought the creature closer to his face. Is this how a monkey should look like? There was no doubt that the creature in his hand was related to a monkey. Everything about it was the same, from its body to its fur. The only problem was, why does it have 8 eyes? Since when have monkeys on Earth gotten 8 eyes? Liam's face only became more confused as the monkey in his hand squealed more loudly. Hayak. 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 Well, whatever. Having lost interest in the monkey, Liam brought his other hand near its head. Since you attacked me first, don't blame me for what happens next. Then, without any warning, Liam flicked his finger toward the monkey's head, causing blood to spill everywhere as the monkey's body vanished. How tiresome. Clapping his hands together to get rid of the blood on his hands, Liam proceeded to look around him. Echi. A long sigh was let out as he walked away from the scene. I really do hope I find a city soon. I don't want to be stuck in a forest like all the other times in the past. Although his memory was short, he could recall many instances in which he got lost inside forests. What he was currently experiencing was a simple case of déjà vu. I'm getting closer. Continuing to stare at the map interface before him, Kevin jumped across different branches. Due to the lack of detail on the map, he could only follow the dots to get closer to Melissa and Amanda. This proved to be a task that was a lot more difficult than he had imagined, as dangerous beasts lurked everywhere. In the event that he wasn't careful enough, he might just end up without a head. Echa. It should be near here. Standing on top of one of the branches, Kevin leaned forward and supported his body with his knees. Shit, this is a lot. More tiring than I thought. Having run for almost 2 days straight, Kevin was quite frankly exhausted. Unfortunately for him, he really didn't have much of a choice. He was on a different planet, not a city. It took him an extraordinary amount of time just to get to Melissa. Amanda also seems to have distanced herself quite a bit. Taking note of Amanda's Kevin could only sigh to himself before jumping down from the tree branch he was on. But, softly landing on the ground, he scanned the surrounding in hopes of finding Melissa. According to the map, she should be here, and considering that it's never wrong. Stopping himself mid-sentence, Kevin's brows tightened as he noticed something weird. Turning his head forward to the right, he felt a weird mana pulse coming from that direction. It was very subtle. Subtle enough to make it hard for even someone of the rank to notice. However, as Kevin was currently trying to find Melissa, he was able to quickly take note of the small pulse. The latest understudies are on website. What's this? Without thinking too much, Kevin took a step forward and headed to where he felt the pulse, and it was there that he suddenly felt an even weird sensation. Halting his steps in front of a certain area, he reached out with his hand. It was right at that moment that a ripple appeared in the middle of the air as the scenery in front of him started to distort and the scene changed. What the? Kevin's mouth was left to hang open in shock as he stared at the scenery in front of him as he suddenly noticed a large white tent appear in front of him. Most shocking was the fact that he could see Melissa joyfully humming something as she boiled something over a pot. This. Unable to find the right words to say, Kevin just dully stood on his spot. Clank. Upon hearing a familiar sound, I immediately moved to the right side of the wall and avoided the strange goo that came out after the sound. Splash. My stomach churned as I heard the strange sound that came from the goo hitting the ground. Holding onto my stomach, my face grimaced as I mumbled. There's no way I'm eating that shit. Although I knew from Jean that the food was edible, I still couldn't bring myself to eat it. The smell alone was enough of a deterrent. Instead, reaching out for the moss beside me, I pulled it out and brought it to my mouth. I'd rather eat the moss. Bang bang bang. Spoiled. Making out the message sent out by Jean, my lips twitched. Bang bang bang. Ba bang. Ba. Bang. Ban. Ban. Shut up. How does he even know I didn't even eat it? Clicking my tongue, I sat cross-legged on the ground. Alright, it's been about 2 to 3 days since I've been stuck in this place with Jean, and I still don't know the purpose of this place. Every day it was the same thing. At a specific time, both of us would receive food and we would be left alone till then. Just what sort of purpose did this room serve? Also, if my theory of the others possibly coming to this planet just like Jean and I was true, were there other people in here? I really hope it isn't the case. I'm not sure. Suddenly, just as I was about to finish my sentence, I heard a rock grinding sound coming from the right side of the room. In an instant, light spilled from a small crack around the room and I felt my eyes sting like crazy. Cock. Covering my eyes with my hand, I stumbled back and fell to the ground. Shit. The fuck is going on? Chapter 568. I wonder what will happen when I combine the two together. Melissa cheerfully hummed as she mixed a couple of herbs in a small pot. The situation would have frightened any normal person, and they would have frantically tried to find an escape from this strange planet. But Melissa was different. Her attachment to Earth was quite frankly non-existent. Neither she nor her family liked each other. Her staff didn't like her and she didn't like them. Maybe there were her friends there, but could she really even call them friends? Maybe. Well, it didn't matter. At the end of the day, what Melissa cared for the most was research. The way she presented herself made it seem as though she was troubled with all the work she was doing, which was true. There was no doubt that she was overworked, but it did not mean, however, that she disliked what she was doing. In fact, she loved it. Trying new things and proving her father wrong was a lifelong passion of hers that she would never trade for anything else. Just thinking of his salty face. Yeah, I love research. The fact that she found herself on a new planet, with its new vegetation and surroundings, only served to arouse her excitement. Thinking about all the different combinations she could make by extracting the essence of the different plants around her. Isn't this the best? Stirring the pot in front of her, Melissa's smile grew wider. Rustle. The sound of rustling caught Melissa's attention. Her head snapped to the direction where the sound originated. The space surrounding her started to distort, allowing her to get a clear sight of what lay beyond the barrier she set up. Who's there? She raised her voice and stood up. A series of different cards and spheres appeared in her hand. Mana circulated from out of her body, covering the area around her. Shit, how is it possible for my barrier to have been found out? It must be noted that she set up an extremely high barrier. It was something she had paid a lot of money for since she was planning to leave the human realm to collect samples of different plants. Who would have thought it would come in so handy? In any case, Melissa's expression turned extremely solemn as she understood that for someone or something to have already seen through its camouflage, that person was extremely skilled. Hold on. It was at that moment that Melissa heard a familiar voice coming from the distance as she lowered her hands a little. Right then, Melissa was able to catch a glimpse of a familiar figure who was looking at her strangely. Kevin. Spotting the figure, Melissa immediately recognized him. Well, it wasn't that hard. There weren't that many people as handsome as him. Maybe Jean. And definitely not Ren. Although he did seem to have become a lot more handsome than in the past. Visit for a better user experience. Not that Melissa would openly admit it. A mere thought of the faces he would make if she admitted which facts made her stomach flip. Melissa, let me in. Tapping onto the barrier revolving around her, Melissa watched as ripples formed around it. Staring at Kevin, Melissa didn't answer immediately. Instead, she squinted her eyes and carefully observed him. Melissa. The frown on Melissa's face tightened when she heard him call her name. What's the nickname Ren uses whenever he talks with you? A confused expression spread across Kevin's face as he looked at Melissa. What are you doing? And what does that have to do with anything? It has to do with a lot. Melissa replied as her eyes sharpened. So. Crossing her arms together, her foot began to tap on the ground. Currently, she was testing if the person outside was really Kevin. In spite of her excitement about her circumstance, she was not stupid enough to invite anyone who looked like Kevin. Her guard never went down. If you don't answer me within the next minute, I'll keep you out. Melissa grew impatient as she saw Kevin's struggling expression. Ugh. Letting out a groan, Kevin's face grimaced as he eventually murmured something. Push hover. Huh. I didn't hear it clearly. Placing her hand behind her ear, Melissa leaned her body forward. Her hair fell toward her right shoulder. Staring at Melissa, Kevin clenched his fists tightly before he glared in her direction and raised his voice. Pushover, okay? Ren's nickname for me is Pushover. Sounds about right. Confirming that he was indeed Kevin, Melissa walked toward the cabin and pressed a button. Immediately after that, the barrier around her tent quickly started to disappear and Kevin was finally able to come in. Coming out of her tent, Melissa carefully observed Kevin. So, do you have any idea about what's going on? This was the answer that she wanted to know the most. Although she didn't show it externally, she was actually quite happy with the fact that there was hope for her to return to Earth. How would she rub her new discoveries to her father if she wasn't able to return? The latest episodes are on S100 website. That was her biggest grip with the whole situation, and now that it was solved, she was a lot more relaxed. While Melissa was in the midst of her thoughts, scratching the back of his head, Kevin apologetically looked at Melissa. About that. Taking note of Kevin's sudden strange behavior, Melissa's head snapped to face him directly. Kevin's wryly smiled when he saw this. About why you suddenly found yourself here, I think this might have to do with me. Bang. While stumbling on the floor, I felt an intense pain aimed at my back. What do you think you're doing with all the banging on the wall? A sinister voice echoed out as I felt a kick on my ribs area and my body flew toward the other side of the room. Bang. Ugh. Letting out a groan, I heavily gasped for air. The pain? It was excruciating. In spite of this, as I heavily breathed for air, I made sure to breathe in a certain way. If I was going to get beat up, I may as well do it while training. As I felt something hard smash against the side of my head, I bitterly smiled. I'm truly becoming more and more of a masochist. Bang. Cage. Do you really think that we are unaware you are communicating with the person next door? Don't worry, we'll move you both immediately. Ugh. Feeling something grasp my hair, I was suddenly dragged out of my room. Although I kept my eyes closed, I still felt a burning sensation in my eyes as I was pulled by my hair out of the room. It was painful, but compared to what I had experienced in the past, it wasn't anything worth complaining about, as I was soon thrown back into a different room. But I smashed against the hard ground. Be obedient and stay over here. If I see you pull any shit like that again, I'll kill you. There was an echoing sound of rock grating coming from the hallway, and the doors immediately closed. The most important thing was that the darkness returned and my eyes were once again opened. Tears slowly fell on my cheeks. The sudden contact with the light had truly messed up my eyes. In any case, this sudden scenario confirmed one thing for me. The person trapping me and Jean are demons. Despite having my eyes closed the entire time and not looking at them directly, I could tell this much from two things. The sharp nails I felt at the back of my head, and the fact that the person handling me was talking using demonic language. The latest episodes are on S100 website. The long demons used. Considering how important it was only natural that I learned it, and it was also thanks to this that I was able to live in the arena back in the demon world. Whew. Taking a deep breath, I pressed my hand against the side of my ribs. Although I didn't think they would be this rough, I already knew that this was going to happen. In any case, Jean and I knew that the people who had trapped us would soon make a move after all the noise that we were making. Thankfully, it went all according to our calculations. And now we wait. Taking another deep breath, I started to repeat the breathing exercise that I memorized from Han Yufei. Outside a room blocked by a small black door, a demon gazed toward the distance. Have you sorted him, Exilian? I have. Walking over to the other demon, a scowl spread across the face of the demon known as Exilian. He, along with the other demon, Impedius, was in charge of guarding the rooms. Did he put any resistance? Impedius asked as he looked at Exilian. No. Exilian shook his head in disappointment. It turns out he's a much tougher nut than I thought. It didn't matter how much I kicked or beat him, he didn't seem to respond. Same went for me, Impedius said with evident disappointment in his voice. When he recalled how barely he reacted when he dragged the human out of the room by his hair, he could only be disappointed. Shaking his head, he raised his head to stare at Exilian. Has the leader contacted you yet? No. Exilian shook his head. They still don't know how humans got on this planet, but for now they said to treat them like any other laborer. Before they are sent to a labor camp, break their minds and make them obedient. Understood. With a nod of his head, Impedius turned to stare at two different rooms in the distance. Out of curiosity he asked, "How are the three other humans faring?" Turning his head to also look in that direction, Exilian thought for a moment before replying. "Two of them are doing fine, but the other human seems to be on the verge of death." Verge of death. Visit for the best no_free_G experience. He may last a little longer, but I don't know. Unlike the others, he can't seem to get out of the paralysis. Focusing his attention toward the far end where a room sat, Impedius cracked a smile. Just as rumors said, humans are fun creatures to break. Chapter 569. As footsteps rushed out, a creaking sound was heard coming from the wooden floor beneath. A young teen clutching a small soup ran toward a bed in a rundown apartment as a sickly figure lay on it. There were cracks on the walls and there were spiderwebs on the corner of the house as dust filled the area. It was not a place where a child should be in. "Have some soup, mother." Kneeling down, the youth's hand shook as he carefully placed the soup on the shelf beside the bed. The youth was rather skinny and his complexion was rather pale, but his green eyes shone with ambition. Mother." Carefully touching the woman that was resting on the bed, the youth tried to wake her up. The more he stared at her, the greater the pain and void in his heart became. Brian." The woman finally awoke, revealing a pair of beautiful green eyes as she touched the youth's cheek. As her sickly and skinny arm touched the youth's face, it barely remained there before falling weakly onto the bed. Picking the arm back up, the youth placed it on his cheek. A bright smile adorned his face. "Mother, I've got good news for you." A wave of excitement washed over the youth as he stared at his mother lying on the bed. "I've finally got a job." The youth's voice raised as he thought of the job offer that he received not too long ago. In a world that was primarily dominated by the strong, those that didn't have strength were not treated well. Rather, they were considered to be the burden of society as they contributed nothing to the crisis that enshrouded the world. The youth who was staring at his mother was one of the unlucky few who was born without a talent. Or rather, he had one, but it was only of the rank level. Just like his mother. Such talent was a curse in this world as jobs were scarce. Who in their right minds would hire such talentless individuals? People with great talents were the only ones able to land jobs since they were able to use their skills to complete tasks faster and more efficiently. Farming. Why need farmers when you could have an awakened do the same tasks faster and more efficiently? Complex calculations? Just a simple skill and they would be able to do it faster and more efficiently. A tough world greeted the mother and son duo, and they were just one of the many unfortunate ones. That was until most recently. "Listen here, Mom, I know that you're doubting me, but this job is clean. You can trust me." As he held tightly onto the sickly figure's hand, the youth thrust his face forward. "Mom, the pay is really good and with it I'll be able to finally pay for your medical bills. You will be healed." Imagining his mother recovering and playing with him like in the good old days filled the youth with excitement. "Mom, just watch me. I'll definitely cure you." Feeling a clench of his hand, the youth looked toward his mother who looked back at him with a proud smile. "I believe you." Her weak and frail voice echoed throughout the room. Biting his lips, the youth squeezed her hand harder. "Trust me." Visit for the best no_free_G experience. Ugh. Powerless, a figure lay on the floor groaning in a dark room. Help." He murmured quietly as he struggled to move. Currently his body was paralyzed and he couldn't move a single muscle. He could only just barely feel his right foot, but that was just about it. He felt trapped inside of his one body. "I'm thirsty, I'm hungry." To make matters worse, it had been quite a while since he had last drank or eaten something. His mind was blurry and he was going in and out of consciousness. "If only I was born with more talent," the individual thought in the midst of his despair. One thing was clear to him, despite his lack of understanding of what led to the sudden situation. Had he been stronger, he would have never found himself in this situation. This paralysis he was experiencing would have never happened if he was stronger or even a little bit more talented. Never. Drip. Drip. The dripping sound from the corner of the room served no purpose as it only heightened the individual's paranoia and sense of thirst. His eyes slowly grew bloodshot. "Ugh." While biting his lips until they bled, the individual moved his body with all his strength. Water. He desperately needed water at the moment. Without it he was a goner. Ugh. As veins bulged on the side of his face, the figure slowly pushed his body with his foot. The only part of his body that he could feel. It will definitely make it. Alright, I'm done packing. Let's head back to Earth. Melissa patted her hands in satisfaction as she headed toward Kevin. Kevin shook his head and stared into the distance. We aren't leaving him yet. Melissa tilted her head. Didn't you say before that it was your fault for bringing me here? You surely must know of a way to return. I do. Kevin replied while squinting his eyes and staring at the interface in front of him. He was currently looking at Amanda. Amanda has been staying in the same spot for quite a while. Is she troubled with something? Or is she just resting? Kevin. Startling Kevin out of his thought was Melissa's voice. Turning his head, he was met with her annoyed face. What? Did you not hear me? Taking a look at one of the plants in the distance, Melissa raised up her glasses. What are you thinking about? Are you telling me that there's no way back to Earth? Calm down for a second. In an attempt to stop Melissa from talking, Kevin raised his hand and gazed in Amanda's general direction. There is a way to go back to Earth. But there's a bit of a problem. I don't like the sound of this. Melissa's face hardened a little bit. Whenever I hear such words, I know there's incoming trouble. Scratching the side of his cheek, Kevin meekly looked at Melissa before bitterly smiling. Right on. It's not what you think, Melissa. The problem isn't exactly big. Not big. Melissa raised her brow. Crossing her arms together, she smiled. Please do tell me. The smile she wore on the outside looked normal, but Kevin knew just how angry she was inside. Her anger was understandable. For her to be suddenly dragged into a different planet out of nowhere. Anyone else in her situation would react the way she did. This was why Kevin didn't get angry or react. Kevin struggled to find the right words to say as he gazed at Melissa. In the end, he came clean as he noticed Melissa's darkening expression. Basically, you weren't the only one dragged here. Amanda and the others have also been dragged here. After the assault, 3 days passed, but nothing really changed. Except for the fact that Jean and I weren't in opposite rooms anymore. The routine was pretty much the same. Drink water and bang the wall with my arms. Wasn't exactly the most exciting routine, but it was better than doing nothing. As I sat cross-legged in the middle of the room, I took a deep breath and my chest heaved up and down rhythmically. I'm getting close. My arms were tingling, a sign that I was on the verge of reaching the next stage of my body art practice. Body hardening. Since I only used my arms and hands at the moment, those were the only areas that were hardening, but in any case, this was what I wanted since I could feel power surge from within me. With enough practice, I could break down the wall with just one punch once I mastered the art. It might take a while, but it was definitely possible. And that was all possible with my mana sealed. Taking another breath, I mumbled underneath my breath. Just a little bit more. Crack, crack. In a world where red dyed the skies, rotted vegetation, sparse water, and cracks tore the ground apart, a dark silhouette stepped into the middle of the void, tearing apart the space and finally entered the planet. Observing the planet from above, the figure fell slowly toward the ground. What a shithole. Landing on the ground, his presence spread throughout the planet and the ground beneath him trembled. Immediately after, several demons rushed from a very far distance as the demon that had just arrived noted their approaching figures. Your Royal Highness, Magnus. In front of the dark figure, the demons kneeled immediately. There were approximately 2 of them and both did not dare look up. Briefly glancing at the demons, Magnus waved his hand. Rise up. Yes, Your Excellency. Slowly the demons rose to their feet. Standing up, they perspired from the sides of their faces as their backs remained straight. Taking a look at the surroundings, Magnus monotonously asked, Have you seen any humans on this planet recently? Humans. Suddenly faced with a question, the 2 demons turned to look at one another with confused looks. Taking note of their reactions, Magnus immediately lost interest in them. So you haven't? Quiet. Flicking his finger, the demon that was just about to speak disintegrated on the spot. After that, the other demon's expression paled significantly as his back straightened further, and he stopped speaking altogether. The fear in his eyes was evident as he looked at Magnus. Meeting the demon's eyes, Magnus softly muttered, "I don't like it when someone speaks when I don't give them permission to speak." The demon immediately nodded his head. With no regard for the other demon, Magnus sank into thought. This is the third planet where humans have not been found. While I don't know why His Majesty is so fixated on a couple of humans, considering his personality, it must be about something extremely important. In Magnus' eyes, Jezebeth was like a god. A figure that was beyond the realm of mortals and was omnipotent. Nothing could escape his eyes. And for him to pay this much attention to some humans, Magnus knew that he had to take this task extremely seriously. There's still a couple of planets missing. The closest one should be Alonia, while the closest one after that is Cassaria. I'll step into Alonia first before paying a visit to Cassaria. It shouldn't take too long. Magnus nodded to himself as he planned his future course of action. Taking a glance at the demon beside him, he waved dismissively. "You have a good sense." The space in front of him cracked immediately after he said those words. Taking a step into the crack, his figure soon disappeared from the spot. Chapter 570. In the dense vegetation, Melissa noticed something ahead of her. "Watch out." As Melissa pushed Kevin behind her, she stomped on a plant in front of him. A strange pink gaseous substance was released into the air immediately after she did that. A quick wave of her hand cleared it from Melissa's view. What was that? Kevin was startled by her sudden actions and asked what was going on. In fact, he was more surprised by the fact that she knew that the plant she stepped on could do that than anything else. Melissa glanced at Kevin while patting her hands together. "What do you think I've been doing while you were gone?" Having just recalled her boiling something over a pot and relaxing in her tent, Kevin wasn't sure what to say. She clearly looked like she was having the time of her life with him. Nevertheless, he chose to go with the answer he thought was correct. Checking the attributes of the plants? Correct. Melissa bent down and carefully picked up the small flower from the ground. "I call this flower Pendulum Mimosa, a flower with the capabilities to render one immobile and paralyze their muscles." Kevin looked at the flower in surprise. "Exactly how strong are the properties of this flower?" "Not that much," Melissa replied as she tossed the flower away. "It isn't exactly very potent, however. That's mostly because the concentration of the flower extract isn't very high. If I wanted to, I could create a paralysis effect that would be able to incapacitate even you." "Me?" Kevin's face turned strange as he stared at the flower. Several questions were running through his mind at the moment, especially after learning that the flower could paralyze him and rank hero. Can a little flower like that really paralyze me? He found it rather hard to believe if he had to be honest. "Don't believe me?" Taking note of Kevin's skeptical look, Melissa took out a small test tube from her dimensional space. Visit for a better user experience. The liquid inside had a blood red color. "Well, you're in luck, Kevin. I've already tested this in the past and I have got a sample with me. How about you give it a go?" "I'm good." After stepping away from Melissa, Kevin jumped up into the air and landed on top of a branch. He had a look of deep apprehension as he looked at Melissa. "Let's say that I believe you. Just how much of the extract would you need to actually paralyze me?" "Not much if your mana is sealed." Putting the rest tube away, Melissa followed Kevin's example and jumped up on the tree branch. Perfectly landing on it, she continued. "As you know, the more one ranks up, the stronger their bodies become." "Yes." Kevin nodded his head. His understanding of this concept was natural. Everyone who had attended the lock knew it. Each rank increase results in a stronger, more durable body. Of course, the human body was quite fragile compared to those of other races. Nevertheless, the fragility of human bodies didn't matter much to most humans since they could coat them with mana to mitigate it. Their method was similar to that of the elves as they too had fragile bodies. "How does that have anything to do with the poison?" "It has a lot to do," Melissa replied as she snappily looked at Kevin. "The stronger one's body, the more concentrated the extract needs to be. If someone like you takes the extract, it would take a lot of time for it to take effect simply because of how much mana your body has." Pausing for a moment, Melissa took out another test tube from her dimensional space. This time the liquid inside of it was of a strange blue color. "After testing, I learned that if you mix the extract with another extract of a plant I found, the Illuna Malior, you can seal their mana and simultaneously paralyze their bodies for a long period of time." Bringing the test tube in front of her, Melissa's eyes twinkled with excitement. The interesting thing about these two extracts is that they complement each other perfectly. As in, if the two extracts are mixed together, the strength of the mixture will increase enormously. What? Paying close attention to what Melissa was saying, Kevin found himself entranced by her words as he stopped moving altogether. What do you mean by what you've just said? Putting the test tube away, Melissa briefly looked at Kevin. I meant what I meant. If the two mixtures are combined together, the properties of both will increase and someone will find their mana locked for a very long time. The same could be said for their muscles, but that can quickly be resolved if someone has a good body art or connection to their muscles. I see. Kevin faintly nodded his head in understanding. Raising his head, he asked another question. What about the mana sealing method? Is there a way to get rid of that? No idea. Melissa replied with a shrug of her shoulders, causing Kevin to stumble on the spot. Taking note of this, Melissa looked at him with a strange look. What's wrong? Did I say something weird? No, not really. Kevin shook his head as he avoided looking into her eyes. Unfortunately for him, it only served to irritate Melissa more as she pressed her hand against his shoulder and turned him around. Out with it. Tell me exactly what's the problem. Echi. Realizing that he had no way out, Kevin could only sigh out loud as his shoulders slumped. I was just surprised by the fact that you didn't know the cure for something like that when you're usually the type to know everything. Huh. Melissa's face turned strange as her eyes squinted and her mouth turned into a scowl. What do you take me for? Some sort of god? Why in the world do you think that I would know everything? I dunno. Kevin shrugged his shoulders as he looked toward the distance. I just thought that you knew. Melissa glared in Kevin's direction as her arms crossed. I'll let you know that I've been experimenting with all sorts of different plants. There was simply not enough time for me to properly test all of the plants on this planet yet. Especially when it only took you a day for you to find me. Melissa suddenly paused there as her brows jumped up. Wait a second. Raising her head up to look at Kevin, Melissa calmly asked. Where are headed at the moment? Didn't you say something about finding Amanda? Yeah, I did. Kevin was quick to reply, but he was also quick to regret. After saying these words, he covered his mouth with both hands as he looked at Melissa, who was looking at him with a strange yet disgusted expression. I didn't pay much attention to this detail a while back, but now that I think about it, it's quite strange that you found me suddenly. And now you tell me that you're looking for Amanda as though you know exactly where she is. Her eyes turned into slits. Visit. For the best no_underfruit_shinji experience. Kevin, don't tell me. Stay behind me. Angelica carefully surveyed her surroundings after pushing Ryan behind her. While scanning the surroundings, she had her mind fully alert. After appearing in this strange world for a couple of days, she was at a loss as to what to do next. One silver lining about the situation was that she wasn't transported alone but with Ryan, who was helping her heal her injuries from that weird human who had assaulted her not too long ago. He's strong. Recalling the short moments prior to when the two of them fought, Angelica found herself dreading their next encounter. In spite of the fact that he didn't exactly beat her at the time, because he caught her off guard and she already had a weakened state due to a sudden situation, Angelica knew she had only a 50-50 chance of beating him. In any case, she was currently stuck in some unknown place with Ryan and they were currently looking for a way out of the place. I see something. It was right at that moment that Angelica was able to hear Ryan's voice. Turning around, she softly asked, What did you find? Ryan frowned as he zoomed in on the drone feed, revealing a small clearing inside a forest. From there he could see several silhouettes running away from something. When Ryan pinched his fingers on the screen, he was able to get a better view of the situation, and he recognized 3 familiar faces from there. They were Leopold, Hein, and Ava. It's the others. Immediately after recognizing them, Ryan jumped up in the air as he rushed toward Angelica. Angelica, look. Wait a moment. Hyuk. Ryan choked on the shirt after Angelica grabbed him by the collar. Indifferent to Ryan's behavior, Angelica snatched the device in his hand and carefully examined it. After that, she quickly dragged him behind her. Hey, wait. In spite of Ryan's complaints, Angelica paid no attention to him as their bodies jumped in the air and shot toward the distance. Let's go. They looked to be in trouble.